Everyone tells you to be careful, to not trust strangers, to always double-check before you act. I ignored all of that one September morning. I got into the wrong car with the wrong man at the wrong time. Except, maybe it was exactly right. This is my story, and I promise you've never heard anything like it. The acrid smell of burnt toast filled Rachel Thompson's tiny Brooklyn studio apartment as she frantically searched for her other black heel. The morning sun streaming through her window seemed to mock her. It was supposed to be the perfect day. Instead, it was turning into a catastrophe. No, no, no! Rachel's voice cracked as she checked her phone again. 9:47 a.m. Her interview at Harrison Industries was at 10:30, and she was still in Williamsburg, a good 45 minutes from Midtown Manhattan on a perfect traffic day. Today was definitely not a perfect traffic day. She finally found the heel wedged behind her radiator, probably kicked there in last night's anxious pacing. Rachel had spent weeks preparing for this interview, the portfolio review, the practice questions, the perfect outfit. Harrison Industries was the golden ticket in the media world, and their creative director position was her dream job. She could not be late. Her phone buzzed with the Uber notification. "Your driver Michael is arriving in a black Mercedes, 2 minutes away." Rachel grabbed her leather portfolio, slightly worn at the corners but filled with her best work, and rushed down the 3 flights of stairs, nearly twisting her ankle on the second landing. The old building's walls were covered with peeling paint and graffiti tags, a stark contrast to the sleek corporate world she was about to enter. The humid September air hit her face as she burst through the building's entrance onto Bedford Avenue. The street was alive with the typical Brooklyn morning chaos. Cyclists weaving through traffic, the smell of fresh bagels from the corner deli mixing with exhaust fumes, and the distant rumble of the L train underground. A pristine black Mercedes sedan sat idling at the curb, looking completely out of place among the neighborhood's usual beat-up Toyotas and delivery vans. Thank God! Rachel yanked open the back door and threw herself inside, her portfolio landing with a thud on the leather seat beside her. "I'm so sorry. I know I'm running late. Can we please take the Williamsburg Bridge? I've heard the tunnel is a nightmare right now, and I absolutely cannot be late for this interview. It's at Harrison Industries. Do you know it? The big building on 6th Avenue? The words tumbled out in a breathless rush as she fumbled with her seatbelt. It took her a moment to register the interior. This was unlike any Uber she had ever been in. The leather was buttery soft. There was actual legroom. And was that the scent of sandalwood? She looked up at the rear-view mirror. The driver's eyes met hers, and Rachel's heart skipped a beat for an entirely different reason than panic. They were the most striking blue-gray eyes she had ever seen, filled with unmistakable amusement. Harrison Industries. The driver's voice was smooth, educated, definitely not the typical rideshare driver accent. I know it well. James Harrison had been having a spectacularly boring morning until approximately 30 seconds ago. His early meeting had been cancelled, giving him a rare moment to drive himself to the office, something his security team hated, but he occasionally insisted upon for a taste of normalcy. Then this whirlwind of a woman had launched herself into his car, smelling of vanilla perfume and desperation, and apparently mistaken him for her Uber driver. He should correct her. He absolutely should tell her this was not her ride. But something about the genuine panic in her voice, the way her dark hair had come slightly loose from its professional bun, and the smudge of what looked like burnt toast on her cream blouse, made him pause. When was the last time someone had treated him like a normal person? When had anyone been this authentically themselves around him, without the calculated deference his position commanded? "So, Harrison Industries," James said, pulling smoothly into traffic and heading toward the Williamsburg Bridge as requested. He adjusted his tie, Hermes probably worth more than her entire outfit, and kept his expression neutral. "Big interview?" "The biggest," Rachel exhaled, finally catching her breath. She pulled down the visor mirror and groaned at her reflection. "Oh God, do I have something on my face? Please tell me I don't have something on my face." "Just a small smudge on your collar," James said, fighting back a smile. "Left side." "Of course I do." Rachel wetted her finger and rubbed at the spot. "This morning has been a complete disaster. My alarm didn't go off. I burnt my breakfast. My coffee maker exploded, literally exploded. There's coffee on my ceiling. And now this." She gestured at her blouse. "I'm supposed to be interviewing for creative director, and I look like I got dressed in the dark while fighting a tornado. James merged onto the bridge, the Manhattan skyline spreading before them in all its glittering glory. The East River sparkled below, dotted with boats. Creative director is a significant position. You must be quite talented. I'd like to think so, Rachel said, her voice softening with a mixture of hope and doubt. I've been working as a freelance designer for 3 years, built up a solid portfolio, won a few small awards. Nothing major, but enough to get my foot in the door. Harrison Industries is known for taking chances on fresh talent, and their current campaign work is just— She made a gesture like her head was exploding. Incredible, innovative, everything I want to be part of. What makes you think you'll fit in there? James asked, genuinely curious now. He had sat through countless interviews, heard every rehearsed answer imaginable, but this woman stuck in traffic with her fake Uber driver might actually tell him the truth. Rachel was quiet for a moment, staring out at the city. Honestly, I'm terrified I won't. Everyone there probably went to prestigious schools, had internships at fancy agencies, knows all the right people. I went to CUNY, worked 3 jobs to pay for it, and my biggest connection in the industry is my former roommate, who does social media for a pet food company. She laughed, but there was an edge of vulnerability to it. But I work harder than anyone I know. I see things differently, and I'm willing to prove myself however long it takes. Something in James's chest tightened unexpectedly. How long had it been since he had heard that kind of raw ambition, untainted by entitlement? Most people who entered his orbit wanted shortcuts, wanted his name to open doors. This woman just wanted a chance to work. The person interviewing you would be lucky to have someone with that attitude, he said quietly. Rachel met his eyes in the mirror again and smiled, a real, genuine smile that transformed her face from pretty to luminescent. That's really kind of you to say. Most Uber drivers just nod and turn up the radio. James bit back a laugh. I'm not most Uber drivers. Clearly, Rachel said, gesturing around the pristine interior. This is the nicest ride I've ever been in. 5 stars for you, Michael. Michael. Right. That was the actual driver's name. James felt a small pang of guilt, but not enough to stop this charade. Not yet. They were approaching Midtown now, the traffic thickening as yellow cabs swarmed around them like angry bees. The smell of hot dogs and pretzels from street vendors wafted through the air vents. James navigated expertly through the chaos, taking a shortcut through a side street that only locals knew. How do you know this route? Rachel asked, impressed. I've been driving in this city for a long time, James said, which was technically true. You learn the secrets. Well, you just saved my life, Rachel said, checking her phone. We might actually make it on time. Maybe this day isn't completely cursed after all. As they pulled up in front of the gleaming glass tower that housed Harrison Industries, James felt an unexpected reluctance for this encounter to end. The building rose 47 stories above them, his name etched in subtle letters above the entrance. In a few minutes, she would walk through those doors and discover exactly who her Uber driver really was. Here we are, James said, putting the car in park. Harrison Industries. Rachel gathered her portfolio, her hands trembling slightly. Thank you so much. You have no idea how much this means. I was convinced I'd ruined everything before it even started. Something tells me you're going to do just fine, James said, and he meant it. She opened the door, then paused and turned back. What's your real name? I feel like I should know the name of the person who saved my career before it even began. James hesitated for just a fraction of a second. James. Thank you, James, Rachel said warmly. I hope the rest of your rides today are less chaotic. I doubt any of them will be as interesting, he replied truthfully. As Rachel walked toward the building, straightening her posture and running her fingers through her hair one last time, James watched her go. He should feel guilty about the deception. Instead, he felt more alive than he had in months. His phone buzzed with a text from his assistant, Margaret. Where are you? The creative director interviews start in 15 minutes. James smiled slowly. On my way, he typed back, and I think we might have found our candidate. He had no idea just how complicated things were about to become. The lobby of Harrison Industries was everything Rachel had imagined and more. Soaring ceilings, minimalist design with warm wood accents and massive displays showcasing the company's award-winning campaigns. A digital waterfall cascaded down one wall, displaying the company motto, Innovation through authenticity. Rachel approached the reception desk, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor. The receptionist, a polished woman in her 50s with perfectly coiffed silver hair, smiled professionally. "Good morning. I'm Rachel Thompson. I have a 10:30 interview for the creative director position." "Of course, Miss Thompson. You're right on time." The receptionist typed something into her computer. "Please take the elevator to the 42nd floor. Someone will meet you there." Rachel's stomach did a nervous flip as the elevator climbed. She caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. The toast smudge was gone, at least. She touched the small silver pendant her grandmother had given her, a habit when she needed courage. The elevator doors opened to reveal a sleek reception area, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. A young woman in a crisp navy suit stood waiting. "Miss Thompson, I'm Jessica, Mr. Harrison's executive assistant. He's running just a few minutes behind. Can I get you some water? Coffee?" "Water would be great, thank you," Rachel said, her throat suddenly dry. Mr. Harrison. The CEO himself was conducting the interview. Rachel's research had told her that James Harrison, 34, had inherited the company from his father 5 years ago and transformed it from a traditional media firm into a digital powerhouse. She had seen his photo on the company website, handsome in that distant corporate way that made powerful men look interchangeable. Jessica returned with water in a glass that probably cost more than Rachel's monthly subway pass. "He'll be ready for you in just a moment. I have to say your portfolio came highly recommended." "Really?" Rachel tried not to sound too surprised. "By whom?" "I'm not sure, actually, but Mr. Harrison specifically requested you be added to today's interview schedule." Jessica smiled warmly. "That's unusual. He typically lets the HR team handle the initial screenings." Before Rachel could process this information, a door opened down the hallway. A tall figure emerged, and Rachel's world tilted on its axis. No, 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 no. James from the car, her Uber driver with the knowing eyes and expensive Mercedes, was walking toward her in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. His blue-gray eyes met hers with that same amused expression, but now she understood why he had looked so comfortable in that luxury vehicle. Because it was his vehicle. Because he was James Harrison, the CEO, the man she was supposed to impress. The man she had just spent 20 minutes complaining to about burnt toast and exploding coffee makers. Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. The glass of water trembled in her hand. "Miss Thompson," James said, extending his hand, his voice carrying that same smooth tone that had put her at ease in the car. "Thank you for coming in today. I'm James Harrison." Rachel shook his hand automatically, her mind racing. Should she acknowledge their earlier meeting, pretend it never happened, throw herself out the 42nd floor window? "Mr. Harrison," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. It's an honor." His handshake was firm, and when she met his eyes, she saw something that looked almost like an apology, or maybe a challenge. "Please, come into my office," James said, gesturing down the hall. "I'm looking forward to discussing your work." Rachel followed him on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. His office was stunning, a corner suite with views of both Central Park and the Empire State Building, but she barely registered the decor. Her mind was too busy replaying every mortifying moment from the car ride. I told him I went to CUNY. I told him I was terrified I wouldn't fit in. I told him my biggest connection was someone who works for a pet food company. James settled behind his desk, a sleek piece that looked like functional art, and gestured for Rachel to sit in one of the leather chairs across from him. She perched on the edge, clutching her portfolio like a shield. "So," James began, steepling his fingers, "shall we address the elephant in the room?" Rachel's cheeks burned. "I am so sorry. The car was there and I was late and I just assumed—" "That I was your Uber driver," James finished, and to her shock he smiled. Not a polite corporate smile, but a genuine one that reached his eyes. "I gathered that. You let me go on and on," Rachel said, mortification warring with indignation. "You let me talk about how terrified I was, and you knew the whole time that this was—" "I know," James said, and he had the grace to look slightly sheepish. "I apologize for the deception, but in my defense, you were very entertaining." "Entertaining," Rachel repeated flatly. She stood up, gathering her portfolio. Thank you for your time, Mr. Harrison. I'll see myself out. Wait. James stood as well. Please, sit down. So you can laugh at the girl from CUNY who got dressed while fighting a tornado? Rachel's voice cracked. I understand. This makes a great story for your next executive dinner party. Let me tell you about the time an applicant mistook me for her Uber driver. Hilarious. That's not what this is, James said, his voice serious now. Rachel, Miss Thompson, please sit down, let me explain. Something in his tone made her pause. Maybe it was the use of her first name, said with unexpected gentleness. Maybe it was the fact that he looked genuinely concerned rather than amused. Against her better judgment, Rachel sat back down. James returned to his seat and was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Do you know what it's like to have every interaction filtered through your title? Every conversation calculated because of your position? Rachel shook her head slowly. It's exhausting, James continued. People tell me what they think I want to hear. They rehearse their authenticity until it becomes another form of performance. But this morning, in that car, you were just you. Real, honest, scared and hopeful and determined. He leaned forward. How you told me exactly what you thought, not because you wanted to impress me, but because you believed I was someone safe to be honest with. Because I thought you were Michael, the Uber driver, Rachel pointed out. Exactly, James said. And in those 20 minutes, I learned more about who you really are than I could have in a dozen formal interviews. Rachel processed this. So this was some kind of test? No, James said firmly. It was a happy accident, one I'm grateful for. He gestured to her portfolio. Now I'd like to see your work, not because of what happened this morning, but because your portfolio was genuinely impressive when HR brought it to my attention. The car situation just moved you to the top of the list. Rachel studied his face, looking for signs of mockery or condescension. She found neither. What she saw was something she hadn't expected. Respect. Slowly, she opened her portfolio. This is a campaign I designed for a small non-profit in Queens. They had a budget of basically nothing, so I had to get creative. As she walked James through her work, Rachel felt herself relaxing. He asked intelligent questions, challenged her choices in ways that made her think rather than feel defensive. He understood design in a way that went beyond buzzwords. He saw the story behind each piece. This one, James said, pointing to a series of posters for a community arts program. This is exceptional. The way you've incorporated street art elements while keeping it accessible to corporate sponsors. That's a difficult balance. Thank you, Rachel said, genuine pleasure warming her voice. That project took 3 months and about 200 rejected concepts. The best work usually does, James said. He closed the portfolio and met her eyes. Miss Thompson, I'm going to be direct with you. This position requires someone who can think differently, who understands both the artistic and business sides of media, someone who isn't afraid to take risks, but knows how to execute them flawlessly. He paused. Someone who can adapt when the unexpected happens, like ending up in the wrong car. Despite everything, Rachel felt a smile tugging at her lips. I did handle that with impressive grace. You threw yourself into a stranger's vehicle and proceeded to share your entire life story, James said dryly. I'm not sure grace is the word I'd use. I prefer decisiveness under pressure, Rachel countered, and was rewarded by James's laugh, a real, unguarded sound. There it is, James said. That's what I saw this morning. Someone who doesn't take herself too seriously, even when everything matters. He stood and extended his hand again. Welcome to Harrison Industries, Miss Thompson. The position is yours if you want it. Rachel stood slowly, her heart pounding. Just like that? Just like that, James confirmed. Though I should mention, we have 3 other interviews scheduled today, so if you could pretend to deliberate for at least 24 hours before accepting, it would make HR feel better about their process. You're serious, Rachel breathed. You're actually offering me the job. I don't make jokes about business, James said, then reconsidered. Well, I do, but not about this. You're talented, you're genuine, and you have the hunger to prove yourself. That's exactly what this company needs. His expression softened. What I need? Rachel shook his hand, fighting back tears that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. I won't let you down. I know, James said simply. Jessica will walk you through the contract details and start date options. I'll see you soon, Miss Thompson. As Rachel followed Jessica out of the office, her mind spun with everything that had happened. She had gotten the job, her dream job, at one of the most prestigious companies in New York, and it had all started with the worst Uber ride of her life. Behind his desk, James watched her go, a smile playing at his lips. Margaret appeared in his doorway, eyebrow raised. "That was the shortest interview we've ever conducted," she observed. "It was also the most informative," James replied. "The board isn't going to like this," Margaret warned, "hiring someone with so little corporate experience for such a senior position." "Then the board can take it up with me," James said mildly. "Besides, her corporate experience starts now." What he didn't say, what he barely admitted to himself, was that he was already looking forward to Monday morning in a way he hadn't anticipated anything in years. This was either the best decision he had ever made, or the most complicated. Probably both. Rachel's first day at Harrison Industries began with her standing outside the building at 8:45 a.m., clutching a travel mug of coffee she had made in her new, non-exploding coffee maker. The September morning was crisp, carrying the scent of roasting nuts from a nearby street vendor. She watched the river of professionals flow through the entrance, everyone looking polished, confident, like they belonged. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "You earned this." The memory of Saturday still felt surreal. She had called her best friend Maya and screamed the news. Her grandmother had cried. Rachel herself had alternated between euphoria and terror for the entire weekend. Now standing at the threshold of her new life, the terror was winning. Inside, Jessica greeted her with a warm smile and a security badge. "Welcome officially. Let me show you to your office." "My office," Rachel repeated. At her freelance gigs, she had worked from coffee shops and her kitchen table. "Creative director gets the full treatment," Jessica said, leading her to the elevator. 40th floor, corner office with a view of the park. Mr. Harrison insisted. They passed through open concept workspaces where young professionals hunched over computers, the air filled with the click of keyboards and the hum of creative energy. Rachel caught snippets of conversation about campaigns and deadlines. This was a world that moved fast. Her office took her breath away. It was smaller than James's suite, but no less impressive. Glass walls overlooking Central Park, a standing desk with dual monitors, and a comfortable seating area for meetings. Someone had placed a small succulent on her desk with a note, "Welcome to the team. Don't kill this one. J.H." Rachel smiled, despite her nerves. So he had a sense of humor beyond the corporate facade. "Your team meeting is at 9:30, Jessica said, handing her a tablet. "Everything you need is here. Schedules, current projects, team bios. Mr. Harrison will stop by around 11 to check in." After Jessica left, Rachel had 20 minutes to prepare. She reviewed the files on the tablet, memorizing names and faces of her new team. 8 people, ranging from fresh college graduates to seasoned designers, all of whom had probably wondered how an unknown freelancer had landed this position. At 9:30 sharp, Rachel walked into the conference room. 8 pairs of eyes turned toward her with expressions ranging from curious to skeptical. She recognized the look. She had worn it herself when someone new threatened the established order. "Good morning," Rachel said, setting down her coffee with hands that were steadier than she felt. "I'm Rachel Thompson, and I know you're all wondering who I am and why I'm here." A woman in her 40s with stylish glasses and an air of cool assessment spoke first. "I'm Diane Porter, senior designer. We've all seen your portfolio. It's impressive for freelance work." The unspoken word hung in the air, but is it enough for this? "You're right to be skeptical," Rachel said, meeting Diane's gaze directly. "I don't have traditional corporate experience. I haven't worked at a fancy agency or managed a large team, but I've learned to create compelling work with limited resources, meet impossible deadlines, and make clients happy who didn't know what they wanted until I showed them." She paused. "I'm not here to replace anyone or prove I'm better than you. I'm here to learn from you and hopefully contribute something valuable in return." The tension in the room eased slightly. A young man with bright green sneakers and a man bun grinned. "I'm Tyler Chen, junior designer. That was a solid opening. Welcome aboard." The rest of the introductions went smoothly, and soon they were deep into discussing current projects. Rachel listened more than she spoke, asking questions, taking notes. Diane presented a campaign for a luxury watch brand that was elegant but safe. Rachel bit her tongue, remembering her promise not to come in acting superior. But Tyler noticed. "You have an opinion. I can see it on your face." Rachel hesitated. "It's your first day," Diane said coolly. "Feel free to share." "The design is beautiful," Rachel said carefully. "Technically perfect, but luxury watch buyers aren't looking for perfect anymore. They're looking for story, for heritage. This feels like it could be for any brand." She pulled out her tablet and sketched quickly. "What if we incorporated the watchmaker's actual workshop? Show the hands that craft each piece. Make it about artistry, not just luxury." The room was quiet. Diane studied the sketch, her expression unreadable. Then slowly she nodded. "That's actually brilliant. Raw, different from anything they've seen." "It might be too risky," Rachel said quickly, not wanting to overstep. "Or it might be exactly what they need," said a voice from the doorway. Everyone turned. James stood there in shirt sleeves, his tie loosened, looking less like a CEO and more like someone who actually worked for a living. Rachel's heart did an unwelcome flip. "Mr. Harrison," Diane said, surprised, "we weren't expecting you." "I wanted to see how our new creative director was settling in," James said, his eyes on Rachel. "Sounds like she's already shaking things up." "Just offering a perspective," Rachel said, feeling her cheeks warm under his gaze. "The best kind," James said. He looked at Diane. "Run with Thompson's idea. Present both versions to the client and let them choose." After he left, Tyler whistled low. "He never sits in on team meetings. You must have made an impression." "She made an impression before she even started," someone muttered, though not unkindly. The rest of the morning flew by. Rachel reviewed campaigns, met with individual team members, and began to understand the scope of her new role. It was exhilarating and overwhelming in equal measure. At 11:30, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Lunch? Rooftop garden? J.H." Rachel stared at the message. A private lunch with the CEO on her first day? That would definitely fuel office gossip. She texted back, "Is that appropriate?" His response came quickly. "Probably not. Come anyway." The rooftop garden was a hidden oasis, 47 stories above the city chaos. Vegetables grew in raised beds, herbs perfumed the air, and a small table was set with sandwiches from a deli Rachel recognized from her Brooklyn neighborhood, not fancy catering. James stood when she approached, gesturing to the food. "I wasn't sure what you liked, so I got an assortment. There's pastrami, turkey, vegetarian." "You didn't have to do this," Rachel said, sitting down across from him. "I wanted to check in," James said. "First days can be brutal. How are you holding up?" "Your team thinks I slept my way to this position," Rachel said bluntly, then immediately regretted it. "Sorry, that was probably accurate," James finished. "Office gossip is inevitable, especially when someone rises quickly. How you handle it will define your tenure here." "By being so good they can't deny my merit," Rachel suggested. "Exactly," James said, approval in his voice. He handed her a pastrami sandwich. "I heard about your idea for the watch campaign. Diane doesn't praise people easily." "I hope I didn't overstep," Rachel said. "You did exactly what I hired you to do. Think differently." James leaned back, the afternoon sun catching his profile. "This company has been playing it safe for too long. We need someone willing to take risks." They ate in comfortable silence for a moment, the sounds of the city muted at this height. Rachel could see the park spreading green below them, tiny figures moving along paths. "Can I ask you something?" Rachel said suddenly. "Why did you really hire me? Not the official reason, the real one." James considered this, his blue-gray eyes serious. "Because in that car, you weren't trying to impress anyone. You were just trying to survive your morning and get to an interview. That kind of authenticity is rare." He paused. "And because when I asked what makes you think you'll fit in here, you didn't give me a rehearsed answer about synergy or innovation. You told me the truth, that you were terrified but willing to work harder than anyone else. That's what success actually looks like." Rachel felt something shift in her chest, a dangerous warmth that had nothing to do with the September sun. This wasn't just attraction to a handsome, powerful man. This was something deeper, recognition. He saw her in a way few people ever had. "Thank you," she said softly, "for taking a chance on me." "Thank you for being worth the risk," James replied. Their eyes held for a moment too long until James's phone buzzed with an alert. He checked it and sighed. Board meeting in 10 minutes. The joys of running a company. As they walked back toward the elevator, James said casually, "There's a charity gala on Friday night, major industry event. I'd like you to attend, meet some key players, get your face known." A gala? Rachel's mind immediately went to her closet, which contained exactly 0 gala-appropriate dresses. "It's black tie," James said, reading her panic. "The company has an account with a stylist. Margaret will set you up with an appointment." "That's really not necessary," Rachel began. "It's part of the job," James said firmly. "You represent Harrison Industries now. Consider it a uniform." Then, more quietly, "Besides, I'd like you there." Before Rachel could process that last statement, the elevator arrived. James stepped in, and just before the doors closed, he added, "You did well today, Rachel. Better than well." As the elevator descended, Rachel stood frozen in the garden, her heart racing. This was her boss, her CEO. This couldn't become complicated. But as she returned to her office and dove into work for the rest of the afternoon, she couldn't shake the memory of his smile or the way he had said her name. Complicated, she realized, might already be an understatement. That evening, as she rode the subway back to Brooklyn, squeezed between a musician with a saxophone and a student with headphones, Rachel allowed herself a moment of pure happiness. She had survived her first day. She had earned her team's tentative respect. She had a corner office overlooking Central Park. And she had made the CEO smile like he meant it. Whatever came next, she had earned her place at the table, even if that table was increasingly difficult to leave at the end of the day. The Plaza Hotel ballroom glittered like something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors, and everywhere Rachel looked, she saw designer gowns, diamond jewelry, and the kind of casual wealth that made her Brooklyn upbringing feel like another lifetime. She smoothed down the emerald green silk dress the stylist had chosen, elegant, sophisticated, and far more expensive than anything she had ever worn. The fabric whispered against her skin as she navigated through the crowd, champagne flute in hand, trying not to look as out of place as she felt. "You look beautiful," said a familiar voice behind her. Rachel turned to find James in a perfectly tailored tuxedo that made him look like he had stepped out of a classic film. Her breath caught, and she had to remind herself that this was work. Professional. Nothing more. "Thank you," she managed. "You clean up pretty well yourself." James smiled, that genuine expression that transformed his usual CEO reserve into something warmer. "Come on. There are people you should meet." The next hour was a whirlwind of introductions. CEOs, creative directors, advertising legends whose work Rachel had studied in school. James stayed by her side, his hand occasionally resting on the small of her back as he guided her through the crowd, a touch that was probably meant to be reassuring, but sent electricity down her spine. "You're a natural at this," James murmured as they stepped away from a conversation with the head of a major fashion house. Diane was right to be worried about competition. "I'm terrified," Rachel admitted quietly. "I keep waiting for someone to realize I don't belong here." "You belong here more than half these people," James said firmly. "They inherited their positions or bought their way in. You earned yours." Before Rachel could respond, a voice cut through the ambient noise like a knife through silk. "James Harrison, I should have known you'd be holding court." Rachel turned to see a woman approaching, tall, blonde, devastatingly beautiful, in a white gown that probably cost more than Rachel's entire education. But it was the look in her ice-blue eyes that made Rachel's stomach drop. This woman looked at James like she owned him. James's entire body language changed. His shoulders tensed and the warmth in his expression flickered out like a snuffed candle. "Victoria." "Darling," the woman, Victoria, said, leaning in to kiss James's cheek with practiced familiarity. She smelled of expensive perfume and entitlement. "It's been too long. 6 months. 7? 8, James said tightly. "What are you doing here?" "Daddy's company is one of the sponsors," Victoria said, her eyes finally landing on Rachel with the kind of assessment that made her feel instantly inadequate. "And who is this?" "Rachel Thompson," James said, his voice carefully neutral. "Our new creative director. Rachel, this is Victoria Ashford." The name clicked in Rachel's memory. She had Googled James during her research, and Victoria's name had come up in old Society page articles. James Harrison and Victoria Ashford, the golden couple. Engaged. Then, nothing. The engagement had apparently ended about 8 months ago. Creative director, Victoria repeated, her smile not reaching her eyes. How progressive of you, James, hiring someone so young, and from such an unexpected background, I'm sure. The condescension in her tone was subtle, but unmistakable. Rachel felt her cheeks burn. Rachel's talent speaks for itself, James said, an edge in his voice. If you'll excuse us— Oh, don't run off, Victoria said, placing a perfectly manicured hand on James's arm. We have so much to catch up on. My father is looking to invest in some new ventures. I thought we might discuss it, for old times' sake. The way she said old times made it clear she meant something far more intimate than business dinners. My dance card is full tonight, James said, gently but firmly removing her hand. Perhaps your father can contact Margaret to schedule a meeting. Victoria's smile tightened. Still hiding behind your assistant. Some things never change. Her eyes flickered to Rachel. Though I see some things do. Tell me, Miss Thompson, how long have you been working at Harrison Industries? A week, Rachel said, lifting her chin. She wouldn't be intimidated by this woman, no matter how much money or history she had with James. A week, Victoria repeated, laughing, a sound like breaking glass. And already attending galas as James's date. You work fast. I'm here in a professional capacity, Rachel said firmly, though her heart was pounding. Of course you are, Victoria said, her tone suggesting she believed nothing of the sort. She turned back to James. We should talk privately. I have a proposition that might interest you, the kind we used to discuss when we were planning our future together. Something flickered in James's expression. Pain, anger, Rachel couldn't tell. That future doesn't exist anymore, Victoria. You made that choice. Did I? Victoria stepped closer to James, her voice dropping to an intimate whisper that Rachel could still hear. Or did you make it for both of us by choosing this company over everything else? Over us? The ballroom suddenly felt too hot, too crowded. Rachel looked away, feeling like an intruder on something deeply personal. This was between James and his ex-fiancée. She had no place in this conversation. Excuse me, Rachel said quietly. I'm going to get some air. She didn't wait for a response before weaving through the crowd toward the terrace doors. The cool October evening air hit her face like a blessing. She gripped the stone balustrade, looking out over Central Park's darkened expanse. What was she doing? Playing dress-up in a world where ex-fiancés showed up looking like supermodels and speaking in coded references to shared histories? Rachel had been fooling herself, thinking that the connection she felt with James was real, that the moments they shared meant something beyond convenient circumstance. That was Victoria Ashford, said a voice beside her. Rachel turned to find Diane, elegant in navy blue, holding 2 champagne flutes. She offered one to Rachel. I gathered, Rachel said, accepting the glass gratefully. She and James were engaged for 2 years, Diane said, her usual cool demeanor softened slightly by champagne and candor. Everyone thought they were perfect together. Old money, social connections, the works. Then 8 months ago she called it off. Rumor was he spent more time building the company than planning the wedding. Why are you telling me this? Rachel asked. Diane studied her for a long moment. Because I've worked for James Harrison for 7 years. I've seen him with Victoria. Polished, appropriate, exactly what everyone expected. She paused. And I've seen him this week with you, looking at you like you're a puzzle he actually wants to solve, rather than a piece that already fits. Rachel's heart clenched. It's not like that. We're professional— For now, Diane said. But Victoria didn't come here tonight for her father's business interests. She came because she heard about you. At Rachel's surprised look, Diane smiled slightly. Society gossip travels faster than social media. The new creative director who rode to her interview in the CEO's car, that story made the rounds. Nothing happened, Rachel protested. I thought he was my Uber driver. I know, Diane said. But Victoria doesn't care about facts. She cares about competition. And trust me, she sees you as competition. Before Rachel could respond, James appeared in the terrace doorway. His eyes found Rachel immediately, relief evident on his face. There you are, he said. I'm sorry about that. Victoria has impeccable timing for making situations uncomfortable. It's fine, Rachel said, though it wasn't. Old flames have a way of showing up at inconvenient moments. She's not an old flame, James said sharply. She's a mistake I almost made." The vehemence in his voice surprised Rachel. Diane, reading the room with her usual precision, excused herself quietly. James moved to stand beside Rachel at the balustrade, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Subtle, expensive, distracting. "I should explain about Victoria," James began. "You don't owe me an explanation," Rachel said quickly. "Your personal life is your business." "I want to explain," James said, "because whatever she implied in there, it's not the truth." Rachel waited, the city lights twinkling below them like earthbound stars. "Victoria and I were together because it made sense," James said quietly. "Same background, same social circles, same expectations. My father approved, her father approved, the board approved. It was a merger as much as an engagement." He laughed bitterly. "She called it off because I refused to step back from the company, said I was married to my work. Maybe she was right." "Were you in love with her?" Rachel asked, not sure she wanted to know the answer. James was quiet for a long moment. "I thought I was. Or maybe I just loved the idea of doing what was expected, what was safe." He turned to face Rachel fully. "Then a week ago, a woman threw herself into my car, talked about fighting tornadoes and exploding coffee makers, and reminded me what it feels like to actually connect with someone real." Rachel's breath caught. "James, I know this is complicated," James said. "You work for me. There are power dynamics and professional boundaries and 100 reasons this is a terrible idea." He reached out, his fingers barely brushing her hand on the stone railing. "But I can't stop thinking about you, about that morning, about the way you look when you're designing something you're passionate about your laugh." "This could ruin everything," Rachel whispered, even as her hand turned under his, their fingers intertwining. "My career, your company." "I know," James said, "so tell me to stop. Tell me this is just professional, and I'll respect that. I'll be your boss, and nothing more." Rachel looked up at him, at the vulnerability in his eyes that probably few people ever saw. She thought about Victoria's ice-cold beauty, about the risks, about everything she could lose. Then she thought about the way James had seen her, really seen her from the very beginning, how he had believed in her talent when she barely believed in herself, how he made her want to be brave. "I can't tell you that," Rachel admitted, "because it would be a lie." James's eyes darkened with something that made her pulse race. He stepped closer, his free hand coming up to cup her face with unexpected gentleness. "Then we figure this out," he said softly, carefully, slowly, but honestly. "Honestly," Rachel agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. James leaned down, his intentions clear, and Rachel's eyes fluttered closed. "James!" Victoria's voice rang out from the doorway. "Your father is on the phone. He says it's urgent." They sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Victoria stood in the doorway, her expression triumphant despite her innocent words. She had perfect timing, Rachel realized, and she knew exactly what she was doing. James muttered something under his breath that sounded like a curse. "I have to take this," he said to Rachel, frustration evident. "I'm sorry." "It's fine," Rachel said, though her heart was still pounding. "Go." As James disappeared inside, Victoria remained in the doorway, blocking Rachel's path back into the ballroom. "A word of advice, Miss Thompson," Victoria said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "James Harrison may look at you like you're special, but in his world, nothing matters more than the company. Ask yourself if you're really willing to compete with that." She smiled. "I tried for 2 years. I lost. What makes you think you'll be any different?" With that, Victoria glided away, leaving Rachel alone on the terrace with the cold October wind and the sinking feeling that she had just stepped into a game with rules she didn't understand. Inside, the orchestra played on, and the beautiful people danced. But for Rachel, the fairy tale had suddenly become much more complicated. Monday morning came with rain, the kind of persistent October drizzle that turned New York streets into rivers of umbrellas and made Rachel's walk from the subway feel like a small pilgrimage. She'd spent the weekend replaying Friday night, analyzing every word, every look, every almost kiss that Victoria had so perfectly interrupted. The office felt different now. Rachel couldn't quite put her finger on it. Maybe it was the way conversations seemed to pause when she walked by, or how Diane's knowing glances followed her through the hallways. News of James leaving the gala early with an urgent call, and Rachel departing shortly after, had apparently fueled the gossip mill. She buried herself in work, finalizing the watch campaign with her team. Tyler brought her coffee around 10, a gesture that felt suspiciously like sympathy. "Ignore them," he said quietly, nodding toward a cluster of junior associates whispering by the coffee station. "They're just jealous. Half the building has had a crush on Harrison since he took over." "There's nothing to be jealous about," Rachel said firmly. "We're colleagues." Tyler raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. At 11, Margaret appeared at Rachel's door. "Mr. Harrison would like to see you in his office." Rachel's stomach flipped. She hadn't seen James since Friday night, hadn't known what to say in the texts he'd sent over the weekend, casual messages about work that felt loaded with everything unsaid. James's office door was open, but he was on the phone, his back to the entrance as he stared out at the rain-soaked city. Rachel waited in the doorway, taking a moment to study him, the tension in his shoulders, the way he ran his hand through his hair in frustration. "I understand, Father, but the decision is mine to make," James was saying, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Victoria's father can present his proposal through the proper channels like everyone else. No, I will not reconsider. Because 8 months ago his daughter made it very clear that I wasn't worth the sacrifice, and I'm not interested in mixing business with that particular personal history." He hung up without saying goodbye and turned, stopping short when he saw Rachel. "How long have you been standing there?" he asked. "Long enough to know I should probably leave," Rachel said. "No." James crossed the room quickly. "Stay, please. I've been wanting to talk to you since Friday." Rachel stepped inside, closing the door behind her, a decision that felt significant. "Your father sounds unhappy." "My father is always unhappy when I don't do exactly what he wants," James said tiredly. He gestured to the seating area rather than his desk, an informal choice that felt deliberate. "He thinks I should accept Victoria's father's investment proposal, thinks it would be good for the family alliance." "Would it be good for the company?" Rachel asked, sitting on the leather sofa. James sat beside her, closer than was strictly professional. "Probably. Ashford Industries has the kind of capital that could fund our expansion into Asian markets." He paused. "But it would also mean working closely with Victoria, having her involved in board meetings, facing constant pressure to reconsider our relationship." "She wants you back," Rachel said quietly. It wasn't a question. "She wants what she gave up," James corrected. "There's a difference. Victoria liked the idea of being Mrs. James Harrison, the parties, the status, the power. She just didn't want the reality of who I actually am." "Which is what?" Rachel asked. James looked at her, really looked at her, with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Someone who cares more about building something meaningful than maintaining appearances. Someone who'd rather have a real conversation than attend another society function. Someone who—" He stopped himself. "Someone who makes terrible decisions when it comes to letting people in." "That sounds lonely," Rachel said softly. "It was," James admitted, "until a week and a half ago when someone climbed into my car and reminded me what genuine connection feels like." The rain tapped against the windows, creating a cocoon of privacy in the glass tower. Rachel knew she should stand up, make an excuse, establish professional distance. Instead, she heard herself say, "What happened with your father's call?" "He threatened to call an emergency board meeting," James said. "Suggested my personal life is affecting my business judgment. Apparently, turning down a lucrative deal because I don't want to work with my ex-fiancée is evidence of emotional decision-making." "Is he right?" Rachel asked. James considered this. "Partially. I won't deny that Victoria's involvement is a factor in my decision, but it's not the only factor. Ashford Industries has a reputation for hostile takeovers disguised as partnerships. Bringing them in could mean losing control of the company my grandfather built." "So you're protecting your legacy," Rachel said. "That's not emotional. That's strategic." Something in James's expression softened. "You always do that." "Do what?" "See the best interpretation of my choices, even when I'm not sure I deserve it." He reached out, his fingers finding hers where they rested on the sofa between them. "Rachel, about Friday night—" A sharp knock interrupted them. They sprang apart as Diane entered without waiting for permission, her face grave. "We have a problem," she said. "The luxury watch client just called. They've decided to go with our competitor, Ashford Creative Agency." The name hung in the air like a curse. Victoria's family company. James stood slowly. "When did this happen?" "This morning," Diane said. Apparently, Victoria herself reached out over the weekend, offered them a more traditional approach at a significant discount. Her eyes flickered to Rachel apologetically. "They specifically mentioned being uncomfortable with our experimental direction." Rachel felt sick. Her idea, the one James had supported, the one that was supposed to prove her worth, had just cost the company a major client. "This is my fault," Rachel said, standing. "My concept was too risky." "Your concept was brilliant," James interrupted firmly. "This is Victoria playing games." "A game that's costing you money and clients," Rachel said. "Maybe your father is right. Maybe I'm affecting your business judgment." "Don't," James said sharply. "Don't let her get in your head. That's exactly what she wants." "She's winning, though," Rachel said, frustration and guilt warring in her voice. "She shows up at the gala, interrupts us, and 48 hours later we lose a major client to her family's company. That's not coincidence." Diane cleared her throat. "There's more. The client mentioned they'd heard concerning rumors about Harrison Industries' internal dynamics. Someone has been planting stories about workplace impropriety." The implication was clear. Victoria wasn't just going after James's clients, she was going after Rachel's reputation. "I need to fix this," Rachel said, grabbing her tablet. "I'll reach out to other potential clients, prove that my work brings value." "Rachel," James said gently, catching her arm, "this isn't on you to fix." "But it is," Rachel insisted, pulling away. "Every gossip in this building is watching us, waiting for proof that I slept my way to this position." Victoria just handed them ammunition. The new creative director's first major campaign drives a client straight to a competitor. That's not just a loss, that's validation of every doubt anyone has had about me. "Then we prove them wrong," James said. "Together." "Together is the problem," Rachel said, voicing the fear that had been growing since Friday. "As long as people think there's something between us, my work will never speak for itself. It'll always be tainted by speculation." "So what are you suggesting?" James asked quietly, though his expression suggested he already knew. "That we maintain strict professional distance," Rachel said, hating every word. "No more private lunches, no more late-night texts about anything other than work. No more moments that could be misinterpreted." "Misinterpreted," James repeated. "Is that what Friday night was? A misinterpretation?" Rachel met his eyes, seeing the hurt there, feeling it echo in her own chest. "Friday night was a mistake, a beautiful one, but still a mistake." The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unspoken. "If that's what you want," James finally said, his voice carefully neutral. "It's what's necessary," Rachel corrected. "I need to earn my place here on my own merit, and you need to make business decisions without personal complications." "Very professional," James said, and there was an edge now to his voice that cut. "Diane, set up a meeting with the board for tomorrow. I want a full strategy session on client retention and addressing these rumors." "Of course," Diane said, glancing between them with obvious concern. "Rachel, I expect a revised campaign proposal on my desk by end of day," James continued, all CEO now, the warmth from moments ago completely shuttered. "If we're going to prove your worth," he paused, emphasizing her words, "then we need to show the market what they're missing." "Understood," Rachel said stiffly. She left his office with her head high and her eyes stinging with unshed tears. This was the right decision, the smart decision. So why did it feel like she had just lost something irreplaceable? Back at her desk, Rachel threw herself into work with furious intensity. She would create a campaign so brilliant, so undeniably good, that Victoria Ashford and every gossip in Manhattan would have to acknowledge her talent. She would prove she deserved this position, that James's faith in her was justified, even if it meant keeping him at arm's length, even if it broke her heart. By 6 p.m., she had the bones of something special, a campaign for sustainable fashion that was edgy, socially conscious, and completely different from anything in the current market. She sent it to James's email with a brief professional note and gathered her things. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and glittering. Rachel walked slowly through Times Square, letting the neon chaos wash over her. Street performers competed with traffic noise, the smell of pretzels and hot dogs mixing with exhaust and perfume. This was her city, the place where she had dreamed of making her mark. She had the job she wanted, the chance she needed. She just hadn't expected the cost to be so high. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. "Brilliant work. This is exactly what we need. Nothing personal, nothing warm, just professional acknowledgement." Rachel typed back, "Thank you." Then she added, before she could stop herself, "I'm sorry." The 3 dots appeared, indicating he was typing. They pulsed for a long moment, then disappeared without a message coming through. Rachel put her phone away and descended into the subway, wondering if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life, or narrowly avoided it. Above ground, in his office, James stared at Rachel's message until his screen went dark. Then he typed and deleted a dozen responses before finally giving up. Some things, he was learning, couldn't be solved with the right words or the right strategy. Some losses you just had to learn to live with, even when you had only just discovered what you were losing. 3 weeks of professional distance felt like 3 years. Rachel threw herself into work with an intensity that earned Diane's approval and Tyler's concern. She arrived early, stayed late, and produced campaign concepts that were nothing short of exceptional. The sustainable fashion pitch had landed them 2 new clients, and industry buzz was building around Harrison Industries' fresh, creative vision. But success tasted hollow when she couldn't share it with the one person who had believed in her from the start. James maintained perfect professional courtesy. He praised her work in team meetings, approved her proposals with brief notes, and never once crossed the boundary she had drawn between them. It was exactly what Rachel had asked for. It was also slowly killing her. "You look terrible," Maya said over coffee one Saturday morning at their usual cafe in Brooklyn. The November air carried the scent of cinnamon and wood smoke from a nearby fireplace. "When's the last time you slept?" "I sleep," Rachel protested weakly. "You work," Maya corrected. "There's a difference. You got your dream job, Rach. You're supposed to be happy." Rachel stirred her latte, watching the foam swirl. "I am happy." "You're a terrible liar," Maya said gently. "This is about him, isn't it? The CEO?" Rachel had told Maya the basics. The car mix-up, the job, the gala. But she hadn't told her about the rooftop terrace, about James's eyes when he looked at her, about how it felt to walk away from something that could have been extraordinary. "It doesn't matter," Rachel said. "I made the right choice. Professional boundaries exist for a reason." Or, Maya suggested, professional boundaries are sometimes an excuse to avoid risk. Before Rachel could respond, her phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line made her blood run cold. "Urgent. Board meeting Monday 9 a.m. Your presence required." "What is it?" Maya asked, seeing Rachel's face. "I've been summoned to a board meeting," Rachel said, her hands trembling slightly. "In my entire time there, I've never attended one. This can't be good." Monday morning arrived too quickly. Rachel chose her most professional outfit, a charcoal suit that Diane had helped her pick out, understated jewelry, her hair pulled back in a sleek bun, armor for battle. The boardroom was on the 47th floor, a space Rachel had never entered. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and a massive mahogany table dominated the room. 12 chairs, 11 of them occupied by board members whose combined net worth probably exceeded a small country's GDP. And at the head of the table sat an older version of James, same striking eyes, same strong jawline, but with silver hair and an expression of cold calculation. James Harrison Sr. James himself stood near the windows, his back rigid with tension. "Miss Thompson," the elder Harrison said, his voice carrying the weight of old money and older power. "Thank you for joining us. Please sit." Rachel took the remaining chair, directly across from Victoria Ashford, who smiled at her with the satisfaction of a cat who had cornered a mouse. "I'll get straight to the point," Harrison Sr. said. "This board has concerns about recent decisions made by my son, specifically his rejection of a lucrative partnership with Ashford Industries and the circumstances surrounding your rapid promotion to creative director." "Father," James began, but the older man cut him off with a raised hand. "You'll have your turn. Miss Thompson, can you explain to this board how you came to be hired for such a senior position with minimal corporate experience?" Rachel's throat was dry, but she kept her voice steady. "I was hired based on my portfolio and my interview performance. Mr. Harrison felt my creative vision aligned with the company's goals. "And was there any personal relationship that influenced this decision?" Victoria asked sweetly. "Any interactions outside the interview process?" The trap was obvious, but Rachel had nothing to hide. "Mr. Harrison gave me a ride to my interview. I had mistaken his car for my rideshare service." Several board members exchanged glances. Harrison Sr. leaned forward. "Let me understand this. You, a complete stranger, entered my son's personal vehicle, and he then hired you." "He hired me after seeing my work and determining I was qualified," Rachel said firmly. "The car incident was simply an unfortunate coincidence." "Unfortunate," Victoria murmured, "or calculated." "Miss Ashford," James's voice cut through the room like steel, "if you have an accusation to make it clearly." Victoria stood, moving to a screen at the end of the room. "I think the board deserves to see the full picture." She clicked a remote and images appeared, photos from the gala, zoomed in to show James and Rachel on the terrace, their hands intertwined, his hand on her face, leaning close. Rachel's stomach dropped. Someone had photographed them. "These were taken at the charity gala 3 weeks ago," Victoria said. "Note the intimacy, the body language. This is not appropriate professional conduct between a CEO and an employee he hired mere days before." "Where did you get those?" James demanded, his voice dangerous. "Does it matter?" Victoria shrugged. "They exist, and they raise serious questions about judgment and propriety." Harrison Sr. studied the images, his expression unreadable. "James, I gave you control of this company because I believed you had the maturity to separate personal desires from business decisions. These photos suggest otherwise." "Nothing happened," Rachel said, finding her voice despite the shame burning through her. "We never crossed any lines." "Yet," Victoria added. "The photos show intent, Miss Thompson, and intent is enough to create a hostile work environment, to suggest favoritism, to damage this company's reputation." "Miss Ashford makes a valid point," said another board member, an older woman with sharp eyes. "Even the appearance of impropriety can be damaging." "Then let's talk about actual impropriety," James said coldly. He nodded to Margaret, who had been standing quietly by the door. She distributed folders to each board member. "What you're looking at," James continued, "is documentation of Miss Ashford's attempts to sabotage Harrison Industries over the past 3 weeks. Phone records showing calls to our clients the day before they cancelled, email trails of false rumors planted with industry contacts, and financial records showing that Ashford Creative Agency has been systematically underbidding us, sometimes at a loss, specifically to steal our clients." Victoria's confident expression flickered. "That's standard competition. It's corporate espionage when you're using information from your time as my fiancée," James interrupted. "When you're leveraging relationships built during our engagement to damage my company. That's not competition, Victoria. That's revenge." The room erupted in murmurs. Harrison Sr. held up his hand for silence, studying the documents with narrowed eyes. "These are serious allegations, James." "With serious evidence," James replied. "And while we're discussing inappropriate behavior, let's address the fact that Miss Ashford somehow obtained private photographs taken at a charity event and is presenting them to this board as evidence. How did you get these photos, Victoria?" Victoria's composure cracked. "I have friends with cameras." "You had someone follow me," James said flatly. "Stalk me, document my private moments, and now you're using that invasion of privacy to attack an employee whose only crime was being good at her job." Rachel sat frozen, watching James dismantle Victoria's accusations with surgical precision. This was the CEO she had heard about but rarely seen. Ruthless, strategic, brilliant. Harrison Sr. set down the documents. "Victoria, I think it's time you left this meeting." "But now," the older man said, his voice allowing no argument. Victoria gathered her things, her face flushed with anger and humiliation. As she passed Rachel, she leaned down and whispered, "This isn't over." After the door closed behind her, Harrison Sr. turned his attention to Rachel. "Miss Thompson, my son seems to believe you're worth fighting for, both professionally and—" He paused meaningfully. "Otherwise." "Are you—" Rachel stood, her legs shaky but her voice clear. "Sir, I can't speak to my personal worth in your son's eyes, but professionally, I can tell you that I've worked harder in the past month than I ever have in my life. I've landed 3 new clients, created campaigns that have generated industry attention, and earned the respect of my team, despite having every reason to doubt me. She met his eyes directly. I didn't ask for special treatment, and I don't want it. I just want the chance to do my job well. If you don't believe I can do that, I'll resign right now. The silence stretched for an eternity. Then Harrison Sr. did something unexpected. He smiled. "You've got fire," he said. "I like that. James, your judgment in hiring this young woman appears sound." He stood, signaling the meeting's end. "As for the other matter, what you do in your personal life is your business, so long as it doesn't damage this company. But if things develop between you and Miss Thompson, I expect it handled with discretion and documented properly with HR. Clear?" "Crystal," James said. As the board members filed out, Rachel remained seated, her adrenaline crash leaving her shaky. James approached slowly, sitting in the chair beside her rather than towering over her. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You shouldn't have been subjected to that." "You defended me," Rachel said, still processing everything. "You risked your relationship with the board, with your father." "You were worth defending," James interrupted. "Both your work and your integrity." He paused. "I should have handled Victoria differently from the start. I thought ignoring her would make her lose interest. Instead, I gave her time to plan." "She really hates me," Rachel said with a weak laugh. "She hates that you're everything she never was," James corrected. "Genuine, talented, unimpressed by money and status." His voice softened. "Worth fighting for." Rachel turned to face him fully. "These past 3 weeks have been hell." "Agreed," James said fervently. "I thought keeping distance was the right thing to do. The professional thing." And I was miserable," Rachel admitted. "Every success felt empty because I couldn't share it with you. Every morning I'd see you in the elevator or the hallway, and I'd have to pretend my heart wasn't racing. I was so busy protecting my reputation that I forgot to actually live." James reached for her hand, his touch tentative, asking permission. Rachel laced her fingers through his without hesitation. "What are you saying?" James asked. "I'm saying that maybe some risks are worth taking," Rachel said. "Maybe some things matter more than appearances or playing it safe." She squeezed his hand. "Maybe you matter more." James's expression transformed, vulnerability giving way to hope, giving way to something that looked remarkably like joy. "We'll need to do this properly. HR documentation, transparency with the team." "I know," Rachel said, "and we'll probably face more gossip and more challenges." "Definitely," James agreed. "But you're worth it," Rachel finished. "This is worth it." James stood, pulling her up with him. "Can I take you to dinner tonight? A real date, not a working lunch or a company function, just us." "I'd like that," Rachel said, smiling genuinely for the first time in weeks. As they left the boardroom together, Rachel felt lighter than she had since the gala. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more challenges, more whispers, more people questioning their relationship. But for the first time, she wasn't facing it alone, and that made all the difference. Their first official date happened on a Wednesday evening, after Rachel had spent the day in back-to-back meetings, and James had navigated a crisis with a European client. Not glamorous, not perfect, but real. James picked her up from her Brooklyn apartment in that same black Mercedes, and when Rachel opened the door, she couldn't help but laugh. "What?" James asked, smiling at her reaction. "I'm just remembering the last time I got into this car," Rachel said, sliding into the passenger seat. "I was a disaster in heels, late and panicking." "You were perfect," James corrected, pulling into traffic. "You just didn't know it yet." He took her to a small Italian restaurant in the West Village, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. Nothing fancy, nothing showy, just good food and privacy. "I expected you to choose somewhere more." Rachel gestured vaguely. "Pretentious," James supplied. "I get enough of that at business dinners. Tonight I just want to be James, not James Harrison, CEO." Over pasta and red wine, they talked about everything they hadn't been able to discuss in those 3 weeks of careful distance. Rachel told him about growing up in a small apartment in Brooklyn, her mother working 2 jobs after her father left, her grandmother who had taught her that creativity was a gift, but hard work was what made it matter. James shared stories about the pressure of inheriting a legacy, of always being Harrison's son before being himself, of losing his mother when he was 15, and watching his father bury grief in work. "That's why you're so driven," Rachel realized. It's not just about success. It's about honoring what she started. James looked surprised, as if no one had ever made that connection before. She was the creative heart of the company. My father was the business mind, but she was the vision. When she died, something in the company died too. I've been trying to bring it back ever since. You have, Rachel said softly. That's what I saw in your campaigns, even before I knew you. There was heart beneath the polish. James reached across the table, taking her hand. You reminded me of that. In the car that morning, you were so passionate about design, about storytelling. You made me remember why this work matters beyond quarterly reports. The restaurant bustled around them. Laughter from nearby tables, the clink of dishes, the aroma of garlic and basil. But in their corner, it felt like the world had narrowed to just the two of them. I need to tell you something, Rachel said. The board meeting, when your father asked if I was worth fighting for, I almost said no. Not because I don't think I deserve this, but because I was terrified of dragging you down with me. You could never drag me down, James said firmly. Rachel, in the month you've been at Harrison Industries, you've challenged me, inspired me, and made me want to be better. Not just as a CEO, but as a person. That's not a burden. That's a gift. Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. I'm still scared. So am I, James admitted. I've never mixed personal and professional like this. My relationship with Victoria was kept separate from work, probably why it felt so hollow. But with you, everything is intertwined. Your success is something I'm invested in, and not just because you work for me. Because, Rachel prompted, because somewhere between your panicked entrance into my car and now, I fell in love with you, James said simply. Rachel's breath caught. The words hung between them, terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. It's too soon to say that, she whispered. We barely know each other. I know you're brilliant and kind and brave, James said. I know you burn toast and fight tornadoes and make me laugh when I've forgotten how. I know that when you're designing, you bite your lower lip in concentration. I know you take your coffee with too much cream and not enough sugar. And I know that I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. James, you don't have to say it back, he said quickly. I'm not trying to pressure you. I just needed you to know where I stand, so you can make informed decisions about where we go from here. Rachel studied his face, the vulnerability there, the hope, the fear that mirrored her own. She thought about the past month, about every moment that had led them here, about how falling in love wasn't always dramatic or cinematic. Sometimes it was quiet and gradual, built on conversations and small gestures and the terrifying willingness to be seen. I'm falling too, she finally said. I don't know if I'm there yet, but I'm falling. And that terrifies me more than any board meeting or Victoria's schemes. James smiled, that genuine expression that transformed his entire face. We'll fall together then. Take our time. Figure it out as we go. Very romantic, Rachel teased. I'm new at this, James admitted. The authentic relationship thing. Be patient with me. They left the restaurant walking hand in hand through the village streets, the November air crisp and carrying the scent of chestnuts from a street vendor. The city hummed around them, car horns and distant music, the warm glow of apartment windows, the endless energy of New York at night. Can I ask you something? Rachel said as they strolled past Washington Square Park. What made you decide to play along that morning? In the car? You could have corrected me immediately. James was quiet for a moment, considering. Honestly, you looked at me like I was just a person. Not a name or a bank account or a potential connection, just a guy driving a car who might help you get somewhere on time. He squeezed her hand. Do you know how rare that is? How exhausting it is to always be performing, always managing perceptions. For 20 minutes I got to be nobody special, and it was the best part of my week. You're still that person to me, Rachel said. The guy who makes terrible decisions about letting strangers into his car. My best terrible decision, James agreed. The following weeks unfolded with a careful balance. At work, they maintained professional boundaries. No public displays of affection, no obvious favoritism. Rachel's team gradually accepted their relationship, especially as her work continued to speak for itself. She landed a major account with a tech startup, her campaigns earning industry recognition and even a write-up in Adweek. But after hours, they built something real. Coffee dates before work where they shared the newspaper. Late-night walks through Central Park, where James taught Rachel the constellations his mother had shown him. Weekends at Rachel's tiny apartment, where James learned to cook non-burnt toast, and Rachel learned that even billionaires looked endearing in ratty college sweatshirts. It wasn't always easy. There were whispers, judging looks, questions about whether Rachel had truly earned her position, but each challenge they faced together made them stronger. Then, 2 months after the board meeting, the final test arrived. Harrison Industries received an acquisition offer from a massive media conglomerate, the kind of deal that could make everyone wealthy and secure the company's future. But it would mean James stepping down as CEO, becoming a subsidiary president instead. "It's everything my father worked toward," James told Rachel over dinner at her apartment one Thursday night. Snow had started falling outside, coating Brooklyn in white. "Financial security for every employee, expansion opportunities we couldn't achieve alone." "But," Rachel prompted, seeing the conflict in his eyes, "but I'd lose control, lose the ability to make decisions based on vision rather than quarterly earnings. The company my mother built would become just another brand in their portfolio." Rachel set down her fork. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know," James admitted. "The board is split. My father thinks I should take the deal. He says I'm being stubborn, letting pride get in the way of practical sense." "Are you?" James ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Rachel now recognized as his tell for stress. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally standing up for what I believe matters more than money." He looked at her. "But if I turn this down, I'm gambling with other people's livelihoods, with your career. If the company struggles without this infusion, you could lose everything you've worked for." Rachel moved to sit beside him on her worn couch, taking his hand. "James, I didn't fall in love with you because you were safe, or because you made decisions that pleased everyone. I fell in love with you because you care about things that matter, because you value people and vision over profit margins." She paused. "What did your mother believe in?" "Building something meaningful," James said softly. "Creating work that moved people, that told stories worth telling. She used to say that the best companies don't just make money, they make meaning." "Then you know what she would want you to do," Rachel said simply. James pulled Rachel close, resting his forehead against hers. "This could fail spectacularly, or it could be extraordinary," Rachel countered. "Either way, I'm with you." "I love you," James said, the words no longer terrifying but essential. "I know I've said it before, but I need you to know, whatever happens, that doesn't change." "I love you too," Rachel said, finally ready to speak the truth she'd been carrying. "And we'll face whatever comes next together." The next day, James turned down the acquisition offer. The board was divided. The business press called him foolish, and his father didn't speak to him for a week. But Harrison Industries remained independent. And 3 months later, they landed the campaign opportunity of the decade, a global tech company looking for an agency that valued innovation over tradition. Rachel led the pitch. She was brilliant, confident, everything she had worked to become. When they won the account, the entire office erupted in celebration. Later that night, as they stood on the rooftop garden where they'd first almost kissed, James pulled Rachel close. "Do you remember what you said that morning in the car?" he asked. "About being willing to prove yourself however long it takes?" "I remember," Rachel said. "You've proven yourself 1,000 times over," James said. "To the board, to the team, to the industry, but most importantly, to yourself." He smiled. "Though I knew it from the beginning. Because I climbed into your car and refused to be embarrassed. Because you were willing to fight for what mattered, even when you were terrified," James corrected. "That's who you are. That's who you've always been." Rachel looked out over the city, her city glittering in the winter darkness. A year ago, she had been freelancing from coffee shops, dreaming of opportunities like this. Now she stood on top of the world with the man she loved, having earned every step of the journey. "Best wrong car I ever got into," she said. James laughed, pulling her closer against the cold. "Best decision I ever made to play along." They had challenges ahead. There would always be challenges. But they had proven they could face them together, with honesty and courage and love. And that, Rachel realized, was worth more than any amount of success or security. That was everything. 1 year later, Rachel stood in front of her team presenting the final concepts for their biggest campaign yet, a global initiative that would launch simultaneously in 15 countries. The conference room buzzed with energy as her designs filled the screens, each one a testament to the vision she had fought so hard to prove. "And this," Rachel said, clicking to the final slide, "is how we bring it all together. Heritage meets innovation, story meets strategy. It's everything Harrison Industries stands for." The room erupted in applause. Diane caught her eye from across the table and nodded, not just approval, but respect. Tyler pumped his fist in the air. Even the new junior designers, who had joined after Rachel's legendary wrong car story had become company law, looked at her with admiration. James sat at the back of the room, having slipped in quietly halfway through the presentation. He met Rachel's eyes and smiled, that private expression that still made her heart skip after a year together. "Brilliant work, everyone," James said, standing. "Miss Thompson, a moment in my office?" Rachel gathered her materials, ignoring Tyler's exaggerated wink. The office gossip about her and James had evolved from scandal to accepted fact to something almost boring, exactly as it should be. They were simply two professionals who happened to be in love, navigating their relationship with transparency and respect. In James's office, he closed the door and immediately pulled her into his arms. "You were magnificent," he said, kissing her softly. "Watching you present never gets old. Even when you've seen the concepts a dozen times already," Rachel teased, relaxing into his embrace. "Especially then," James said, "because I get to see you in your element, doing what you were meant to do." Rachel looked around his office, the space where she had discovered his true identity, where they had navigated board meetings and conflicts, and ultimately chosen each other. It held so many memories now. "I have something to tell you," she said, pulling back slightly. "I got a call this morning from Parsons." James's eyebrows rose. "The design school. They want me to do a guest lecture series next semester," Rachel said, her voice filled with wonder. "Teaching emerging designers about building a career from the ground up. They said my story was inspiring to students from non-traditional backgrounds." "Rachel, that's incredible," James said, genuine pride in his voice. "Are you going to do it?" "I want to," Rachel admitted, "but it would mean adjusting my schedule here, potentially stepping back from some projects." "Then we'll make it work," James said firmly. "Your success doesn't have to be contained within these walls. You've already proven yourself here. If you want to expand, to teach, to inspire others the way you've inspired this company, then you should." Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. "You really mean that?" "Always," James said. "I fell in love with your ambition, remember? I'm not about to ask you to dim your light for convenience." A knock at the door interrupted them. Margaret peeked in, her expression apologetic. "Sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Harrison, your father is here. He says it's urgent." James and Rachel exchanged glances. Harrison Sr.'s visits were rare these days. Their relationship had been strained since James turned down the acquisition offer. But the company's subsequent success had slowly begun to thaw the ice between them. "Send him in," James said, squeezing Rachel's hand before releasing it. Harrison Sr. entered with his usual commanding presence, but Rachel noticed something different, a softness around his eyes, a slight hesitation in his posture. "James, Miss Thompson," he greeted them formally. Then, to Rachel's surprise, "Actually, I'm glad you're both here. This concerns you both." James gestured to the seating area. "What's this about, Father?" The older man settled into a chair, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I owe you both an apology. Several apologies, actually." Rachel and James sat across from him, stunned into silence. "I've spent this past year watching you, James," Harrison Sr. continued. "Watching how you lead this company with integrity and vision. Watching how you and Miss Thompson have built something genuine while maintaining professionalism." He paused. "Your mother would be proud of the man you've become, and I was wrong to pressure you into decisions that went against your instincts." James's expression softened. "Dad, let me finish," the older man said. "When you turned down that acquisition, I thought you were being foolish, stubborn, too emotional. But you were being brave. You were standing up for what matters, the way your mother always did. And you," he turned to Rachel, "you've brought heart back to this company. Innovation and creativity that we had lost. I was wrong to question your qualifications." Rachel felt overwhelmed. "Thank you, sir. That means more than you know." I also came here to tell you something, Harrison Sr. said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. I'm stepping down from the board at the end of the quarter, retiring fully, it's time. James looked shocked. Father, you don't have to. I want to, the older man interrupted. I've spent 40 years building this company. It's time I remember how to live a life outside these walls. Maybe travel. Maybe finally write that book about your mother's legacy that I've been putting off. He smiled slightly. Maybe even find what you two have found. Someone who sees me as more than a name and a bank account. I think that sounds wonderful, Rachel said gently. Harrison Sr. stood, and James rose with him. For a moment, the two men simply looked at each other, years of complicated history passing between them silently. Then the older man pulled James into an embrace. I'm proud of you, son, he said quietly. Your mother would be too. When he released James, Harrison Sr. turned to Rachel. Take care of him, Miss Thompson, and let him take care of you. That's what partnership is. I will, Rachel promised, and please call me Rachel. After he left, James stood at the window, looking out over the city with an expression of wonder and relief. A year ago, I thought I had to choose, he said quietly. Between the company and innovation, between duty and desire, between who I was supposed to be and who I wanted to be. Rachel joined him at the window, slipping her hand into his. And now I know that the best things happen when you stop choosing and start integrating, James said. When you let all the pieces of yourself exist together, even when it's messy and complicated. Like getting into the wrong car, Rachel said with a smile. Like getting into the wrong car, James agreed. He turned to face her fully, his expression suddenly serious. Rachel, I want to ask you something. He reached into his pocket, and Rachel's breath caught. But instead of a ring box, he pulled out a car key. What? Rachel began. Before you panic, this is not a proposal, James said quickly, laughing at her expression. Though we should probably discuss that at some point. This is something else. He pressed the key into her hand. This is the key to that black Mercedes. The one you climbed into a year ago. I want you to have it. Rachel stared at the key. James, I can't accept a car. It's symbolic, James interrupted. That car is where this all started, where you were brave enough to take a risk, even if it was by accident, where I was smart enough to see something extraordinary, even if I was pretending to be someone else. He closed her fingers around the key. Keep it as a reminder that sometimes the wrong turns lead to the right destinations. Rachel felt tears spilling over. You're ridiculous. I prefer romantic, James corrected. That too, Rachel admitted. She looked at the key, then back at James. For the record, when you do officially propose, and that better not be too far in the future, it better be more creative than handing me car keys. James laughed, pulling her close. Noted. I'll make sure it involves at least minimal effort and possibly burnt toast as an homage. Perfect, Rachel said, kissing him softly. They stood together at the window overlooking New York, their city, their battleground, their home. Below them, countless stories were unfolding, people rushing to interviews, taking wrong turns, making mistakes that would become their greatest adventures. Rachel thought about that morning a year ago, the panic, the chaos, the absolutely certainty that everything was going wrong. She had been terrified of being late, of not being good enough, of not belonging in this world of glass towers and corporate power. She had been so focused on the destination that she almost missed the journey. Thank you, Rachel said suddenly. For what? James asked. For not correcting me that morning, Rachel said. For playing along. For seeing something in me I couldn't see in myself yet. Thank you for getting into the wrong car, James countered. For being brave and authentic and absolutely yourself. For reminding me what matters. Through the window, the city glittered in the afternoon sun. Street vendors sold pretzels and hot dogs. Taxis honked in endless symphony. And somewhere in Brooklyn, another young dreamer was probably rushing to catch the subway to their own life-changing interview. Rachel hoped they would be brave enough to take the wrong car, too. Because sometimes, she had learned, the greatest love stories begin with mistakes. With wrong turns and missed signals and moments of absolute chaos that somehow lead to exactly where you're meant to be. She had gotten into that Mercedes looking for a ride to an interview. She had found a home, a love, and herself. And it all started with one perfectly wrong decision on a September morning in Brooklyn, the best mistake she had ever made. The end. 6 months later, James did propose, on the rooftop garden where they almost kissed for the first time, with Rachel's grandmother's ring that he had secretly asked her family for. And yes, there was burnt toast involved, because he had insisted on making her breakfast first. Rachel said yes before he finished asking. They were married the following spring in a small ceremony in Central Park, with Tyler as the best man and Diane catching the bouquet. Victoria sent a card that simply said, "Congratulations," with no return address, her final graceful exit from their story. And somewhere in Brooklyn, in Rachel's old apartment building, a young designer was probably burning toast and running late for an interview that would change everything. The city never stopped creating stories. This was just one of the beautiful ones,